All right, students, welcome to our basic edits video that you will be using to help guide you editing your pictures at home. The first thing that you're going to need to do is go to your Google Drive, your class period, so your class period, then your work in progress, and then your folder, and then hopefully all of your pictures are also in another folder titled Picture Perfect for this project. Then looking through your photos, you're going to decide which photo you want to begin with editing. I am going to choose this last photo. And then you need to right click or double click on that photograph and choose to download it. We cannot edit photos that are saved on Google Drive. We must save them on the computer that we're working on. So we are going to download the file, and I'm on a Mac, so I can choose Show in Finder. Yours, if you're on a PC, it will show in Windows Explorer. But in general, these photos download to our downloads folder. What I want you to do is move this photo from downloads by highlighting it and typing Control C, and I want you to save your picture somewhere that's easy to find. Sometimes the download folder erases itself, so I don't want you to be working on a file that's in the downloads folder. So I suggest your pictures file, making a folder named photography, and you can name it the Picture Perfect project, and then do Control V to paste that picture in there. And now from here, you can open it into Photoshop, or you can go into Photoshop and navigate to where that is. So I'm going to show you, if you right click on it and you're on a Mac, you can choose Open With and Adobe Photoshop. If you're on a PC, it will look very similar to this. You can choose Open With, and if you don't see Adobe Photoshop in here, you could choose Other and find it, or you can just hop over to Photoshop and locate it from there. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So once you have Photoshop open, you come up to the top menu and choose File, Open. And it's going to open up your browser for you, and you'll need to navigate to where this is. On a Mac, it looks like this, and on a PC, it'll look like File Explorer. So I'm going to my photography folder, in my picture folder, then my Picture Perfect, and then Cassidy right there is the one that I want to edit. I'm going to give Photoshop a second to load it. Sometimes it's a little slow. So there's some important things I want you to do when you first open up a photograph in Photoshop. And the first thing is to click on the Window folder up top. And I want you to hover over Workspace. And I want you to make sure that photography is selected. If another workplace is selected, typically essentials, then I want you to go down and click on photography, and it should change your side panel over here to look like this one. The other thing I want you to do is click on histogram here, and this is going to open up the histogram for your photograph. Histograms show us where the different values of the photo are. So right now, looking at my photograph, we can tell that it's a little dark. And I told you guys that I tend to shoot a little bit dark so that I can lighten up the photos and not have to worry about anything getting blown out. And you can see that reflected in my histogram. All of the information is bunched up over here on the left side, and there's not a ton of information over here on the right side. The right side represents my highlights. The left side represents my shadows, and in the middle would be all of my midtones. And my histogram shows a bunch of little colors too. That's showing me the color balance for each of those different colors as well. So this guy is going to give you important information for what are the basic edits that you need to do on your photograph. Now, before we do any of those basic edits, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to crop our image to be an 8x10 or 10x8. Every picture that you crop for me will need to have those settings. So we're going to click on the crop tool on the left side, and you'll see it open a box on top of your piece. And when you kind of reshape the box a little bit, it'll pull up those rule of thirds lines for you to be aware of as you are cropping your image. Now, when we choose the crop tool up here at the top, it's going to ask you if you want to do it with ratio or with height resolution. I want you to choose with height resolution. And your numbers that you're going to choose are either going to be 8 by 10 or 10 by 8, depending on which direction your photograph goes. My photograph is a vertical image, which means that it is taller than it is wide. So my width should be 8, and my second number, the height, should be 10. Then you can see my new box that matches up with those measurements. For resolution for this project and most projects, I want you to leave blank. When you leave the resolution blank, it just defaults to the resolution that you photographed at. Resolution is how many pixels per inch are in your photograph. Pixels are the little itty bitty tiny dots of color in your image. So if I zoom in, here you can see these are the individual pixels. And you can see each pixel starts to change colors as we get into areas that have more details in them. I'm still in her shoulder. Here we go. I think I'm in her dress now. Can use my navigator to kind of zoom around where I am. You'll never need to be this zoomed in. I just wanted to show you what a pixel is. So pixels per inch, the resolution, I want you to leave that blank for this project and most of our projects. For one of our projects, I will need you to put a resolution in there. Once you have your image cropped to 8 by 10 or 10 by 8, depending on which direction your image goes, then we can start doing our basic edits. So for our basic edits, we're going to come into the image menu on this top bar, and we're going to choose adjustments. The first 3 are the main ones that you're going to use on every single photograph that you ever edit for my class. You could use a combination of all 3 of these, or you could just use a couple of them. Curves does pretty much everything these 2 do, but it's a little bit more complex in figuring it out. These are kind of the easier versions, but I'm going to show you all 3 today. So we're going to start off with brightness and contrast since it's first on here, and it's one of the simplest ones. I like to have my histogram open over here, and then I like to move this window to the side so that I can see the effect of my changes on my image as I'm doing them. So when I click on this little arrow, I can take it to the right to brighten my image, and you can see my histogram over here is starting to spread out. It's starting to move information. I'm increasing the bright colors in my piece or my photograph, so you can see those brights are starting to get bigger up here. Another thing that I really like to do to my photographs is to add in some contrast. What contrast is the separation between the highlights and the shadows. If you don't want contrast in your photo, you can decrease it, and you might notice in my photograph that everything kind of feels very close to each other. There's no like stark bright areas against black areas. Versus if I increase my contrast, you can see over on this right side that my darks really got punched up and my highlights really got punched up as well. But don't go crazy with it. I like to add just a little bit of contrast just so that we have some good separation between those tones, but not a ton. So once you're happy with the photograph, you can press OK, and it will apply those changes. If after you press OK, you go, oh my goodness, no, I hate it, that looks awful, I want to go back. you can type Control Z on your computer or Command Z if you are using a Mac, and that will undo your step. If you have multiple steps you want to undo, you just continue to press Control Z, which I did. I pressed Control Z twice, and it undid my crop as well as my brightness and contrast. To see the different steps that you've done to your piece, you're going to click on this button, which is the history button, and it will show you the steps that you've done on your photograph. If you've done a lot of steps on a photograph, it might not show you all the way to the beginning. It only stores so many of the steps, but you can see here, I can click on each of those steps and it redoes them. So when they are white, they are currently active, and when they are gray, they are inactive. Now, these do work in a chronological way. So if I were to go back to my crop and have it the crop, and if I did a new step, it would erase this one and I wouldn't be able to get it back. But you know how to now do the brightness and contrast. You could go and redo what you did. I liked what I did, so I'm going to click on it to reapply it. And then I'm going to close this menu just by clicking on this button. And now I'm going to show you the levels. So image, adjustments, levels. So levels pulls up our histogram here. So this one's a little bit more in depth, and it gives you the ability to control specific tones in your artwork for brightening or darkening them. So on the left side of the histogram, I told you, was our shadows. In the center is our midtones, and on the right side is our highlights. Now I have these three little arrows that I can now move. And when I bring the right arrow in, it increases the darkness of my shadows. Now that's not necessarily my problem in this picture, so I'm actually going to leave this one over here. The next thing that I can do is adjust my midtones. If I take it to the right, it's now taking my midtones in my artwork, kind of my shadowed areas, but not the deep shadows. And if I take it to the right, it darkens them. If I take it to the left, it brightens them, which I feel like is what this photograph needs. It needs to kind of lighten those shadowed areas. Then with my highlight one, I can bring that guy to the left and it will increase how bright my highlights are. I'm going to be very careful with this because I don't want to create any blown out areas. I look over here and I've got a nice bright spot and I don't want to make that guy any brighter. So I'm just going to do a little bit of increase on that. When you like what you have done and changed on your photograph, you can press OK. You can start to see my histogram has started to balance out a little bit more. I have more information now on this side than I did previously. Typically, a perfectly exposed photograph would be a nice bell curve in the center. I would say that almost never happens, and that's okay because this is a piece of art. It's going to be less of a perfect example of a bell curve and more of your artistic interpretation of a balanced histogram. So press OK if you like it, press cancel if you don't. If you don't like it after you press OK, you can do Control C. The last way that you can adjust the exposure of your image is to use curves. Now, curves brings you this beautiful bar graph along with your histogram showing up in the background. And this is to kind of help you remember where the shadows and where the highlights are getting adjusted. There's a variety of things that you can do with this. First, you can take the endpoints and adjust them. So if your darks were too dark, you could make them lighter in the curves menu by clicking on that bottom point and bringing it up. You can see my image, those blacks are starting to turn gray, which I don't want. If I wanted to make them even blacker, I could bring it to the right, and you could see that they are getting to be much deeper in their blackness. The highlight one, I can do the same thing, where if I want to brighten my highlights, I would drag it along this top. And if I wanted to darken my highlights, I could drag it along this right side. I'm going to leave them where they started. The next thing that you can do is click on the center of your line, and you can curve this line. This increases the overall brightness. So if I bring it up, it's brighter, and if I bring it down, it's darker. I think I'm going to go just a hair below. And once I drop it, it leaves a dot there, and that's creating another point in your line graph. And now what you can do is click on either the top middle or bottom middle, and you can actually create an S-curve to decrease contrast, woo, getting funky, or increase contrast in your image. I'm going to do a very slight increase in contrast. Now, in Photoshop, you can do all sorts of craziness to the coloring and contrast to this image. The goal of the pictures that we take is, especially for this project, is to create the most realistic and fine art version, not a super crazy, wild picture, right? Look at this. We can get crazy with our colorings. This is not the type of photo that I want turned in for this project. If it's something that you really love for your personal artistic creations, you're welcome to save a version like this for yourself, but you will not be turning in a version like this to me. We're going to be turning in something that looks very realistic with minimal editing, just enough to really give it the pop of correct exposure. And if you ever create a point that you don't like, you can click on the delete key, and it will get rid of that point and return the line back to where it would be without that point. When you like it, you can press OK. If you hate it, you can press cancel. Some other basic edits that you can do under this adjustments menu is you can increase the vibrance of your photo, the hue and saturation, the color balance. You can change your image to black and white. And these are the ones that you would want to stick in for this project. I do want to show you the color balance because that's the simpler way for you to adjust if your photograph's looking a little yellow or if it looks a little cool, you can mess with the color balance. So here you can see that if an image is looking a little bit too cyan, which is kind of a turquoise color, you could increase the red in the image, and you'll see now my image looks a little bit more red. This is what a cyan picture might look like. We're gonna go back there. If your image is looking a little too green, you could increase the magenta in the image. And if your image is a little bit too yellowy, this is the most common one, especially with the fluorescent lights in indoor setting, or the, like in my house, I have very yellow warm light bulbs. And so my images can sometimes look a little bit yellowy. I can increase the blues to kind of balance that. Now this picture was taken outdoors, so its color balance is pretty good. I actually liked how it looked popping up that red a little bit. So I'm going to leave that one, and I'm going to press OK. The next thing that I want to show you is how to turn your image into black and white. Image adjustments, black and white. And when you do that, it's going to open up this menu, and you can choose how dark or light these specific color channels are. So if you were to notice that your greens were looking a little dark, you could lighten them. You can see those green grasses in the background. I've kind of lightened them to add another area of lightness in my piece. And you could check on your other colors, see if you felt like they needed to be increased or decreased. I like how that blue increase again added some more lightness into some of those areas. So I'm going to say okay with that. And I have this nice black and white image now. If you don't want it to be black and white, you can press Control Z to undo. Remember that for this project, you are creating 5 different images, so hopefully not the exact same subject in every image, that represent the composition techniques we learned about in the Picture Perfect presentation. You should have a rule of thirds photo, a dead center photo, a bird's eye view photo, a worm's eye view photo, and then your 5th photograph could be a repeat of one of those first 4 composition techniques, or it could be a line photo, either vertical, horizontal, curved, diagonal, leading lines, or it could be framing. Make sure that when you decide what photograph your image is for the composition technique, that you label it that way. What you're going to do when you're done editing your photograph is you need to save your changes. So you're going to click on File and choose Save As. You don't want to just choose Save because I want you to create a new version of this photograph with all of the changes, so you still maintain the original file. In case you did some crazy edit that you ended up really not liking the next day, you would still have your original file to go back to. This is especially important if you turn an image into black and white, because once you save the image, you lose the original coloring of the photo when you turn it into black and white. So we're going to choose Save on your computer. And I'm going to name this with my last name. This is how you will name yours, with your last name. Then the project name, which is Picture Perfect. And finally, with the image type. Now, this image, I know, is a bird's eye view because I was higher than my subject than I normally see her at, because she's taller than me. And even though she's sitting down, I got myself up on a rock higher than her to take this picture. So I'm going to label it bird's eye view. So I have my last name. You will put your last name. Then I have the project name, which is Picture Perfect. And then I have the composition type, which is bird's eye view. If you end up with 2 bird's eye views, make sure that your second one, you add a number on the end. It could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 376. It doesn't really matter. It just needs to have something to make it unique from your first bird's eye view, or else it will try and replace it. The next thing is I want to tell it where to save it. I'm going to save it in the same folder as where I was working, which is in my Pictures folder, Photography, Picture Perfect. Then my format has to be a JPEG. If this says Photoshop, because you've done some crazy edits that it's like, ooh, man, she's going to want me to save these, you are going to make sure that you click on this drop-down menu and change it to JPEG. You cannot turn in a Photoshop document to me. You must turn in a JPEG. And then I'm going to press Save. This menu will open up, and you want to make sure that you always have this guy on the farthest right side for the large file, quality 12 maximum. And then this stuff, you'll keep it at baseline standard, and then press OK. And now if I go to my Finder, I will see in that original folder is my edited version of the picture, Dietz Picture Perfect Bird's Eye View.jpg. We want to make sure not to ever delete this .jpeg, because that is what tells the computer what kind of file this is. Now that my picture is done editing, I am going to go to my Google Drive and I'm going to upload that photograph. So let me move this guy out of my way. I'm going to click on my picture and there we go, and drag it over to Google Drive and drop it to begin uploading it. And once I see that it has correctly uploaded to my Google Drive, I will be able to close this. If you notice that your upload's taking a very long time, you can always cancel it and re-drag over the items. It shouldn't take that long to upload a picture. But now I see here, Deets Picture Perfect Bird's Eye View is in here and ready to go. So once I see that my photo has uploaded correctly, now I can pick my next photograph that I want to download and edit in Photoshop.